And three, two, one. Welcome back, everyone, to the Word Traction podcast. This is Monday. This is post holiday. This is Are you open for innovation? Open source, East versus West. This will be a multi part endeavor because it's an enormous subject. But I've just been intrigued recently by what influences a company, an industry, or a nation to be more um, to prefer or support open source development more than others. And the two most important players, as with almost everything tech related, are China and the U.S. And of course, open source doesn't have to be just AI, but AI is the flavor of the year. And so we'll frame the discussion in terms of AI, but open source, eh, and there are paradoxes, an abundance of paradoxes, because you think of China in a particular way as far as a security state, and you think of the US as hippies inventing computers in garages. And that would lead you to sometimes uh, incorrectly to assume certain things, as I did, and had to be schooled. So, an open source in tech in general, it bloomed in China just as the economy was blooming. We're talking almost 50 years ago now. But China, as we've talked about many times before, is renowned for making 100-year plans. They uh, they they are not like your fearless leader Donald J. Trump. Fearless, except for the cowardice part, is he thinks that things are measured in terms of meal periods. His attention span is so short that he can't plan for tomorrow. He can't even plan for what does the pee pee come after the poo poo. It's he's somewhat limited in that respect. Think back to the dawn of tech in China, and use as an example Larry Ellison and Bill Gates. They were doing some magnificent things back here. China, in an effort to be able to innovate, grow, and profit eventually, wanted access to the same tools, the same software that they had in Silicon Valley and across the United States. And companies were innovating at light speed because of what Mr. Gates and Mr. Ellison and many others did in the 70s in garages, smoking a joint, putting on a Jimi Hendrix record, over dramatizing. But it was a different time. It was a kinder time in our nation for sure. But China, like, yeah, well, that's fine, but we have 1 billion people, and we can't pay 1 billion times $8 a month for this Microsoft licensing fee. Right? So open source exploded there, and there, of course, there's always an element of how did you come by this particular technology. People probably overemphasize the IP theft, but it's a thing. There are court cases that have jury verdicts of Chinese members of the Chinese military disguised as chip or other sorts of software technicians, and they're bringing secrets back to China. But the espionage works We spy on them, they spy on us. We spy on Russia. You know that Putin's all over us, but Putin just doesn't have the developed industry to move at pace as the US and China do. So, out of necessity, initially, China, the open source, even though it was sort of against their overall philosophy of being able to control things to allow for open source, by virtue of that, the openness is that the innovation gets out over its skis and out ahead of the authorities' ability to monitor what's going on. So that was helpful. The decision by the Chinese government to allow that sort of open source innovation, grudgingly at certain times, was a credit to them because that allowed them to become what they are today, which is 7.5 months behind us in just about everything, and ahead of us in EV and other certainly in energy tech fields because Donald Trump has shackled the United States industries because fossil fuel puts more money in his bank account and thereby um, incentivizes him to kneecap innovation in battery tech. Um, it's a B. That's a loud B. Uh, sorry. That's one of the beauties of being outside. You may be attacked by the other. Last week when I was doing this, the bee was so enormous. I was joking that it was a drone. Of course, drones are not a joking matter in most parts of the world. But here on a porch in northern Massachusetts, I can try to add a little levity to what is otherwise a very dire subject. So yay me, and apologies to friends in other places. Yeah. So here is, and then it's Xi Jinping and an economy moving at pace. And the natural tendency of government is to, or the Chinese government, certainly Chinese Communist Party, to try to rein in the development. At the same time, this young class of innovators of the GitHub in their Chinese equivalent, or Giddy, uh, are open source platforms that allow developers to share information, and thereby you can accelerate your work by sharing with contemporaries particular areas of tech that you aren't you don't have the same core competency that other developers do. So that's how that works. And then you think about it in terms of the United States, and I kind of opened with this, but the '70s, California, Bill Gates. Don't know if he was rolling and smoking things in the garage, but he should have been. And all the Google boys, Larry Page, and all of the other innovators. This is pre Elon. Elon came a little bit later. And if we can exclude Elon from any discussion at all, ever, at any time, we will be happy to do so. He is undoubtedly a gifted business person and a miserable fucking human. And USAID is proving that uh, uh, over and over again, whether it's Haitians returning home or earthquakes in the beautiful country of Venezuela, and then all across Africa, where people are going to be dying in large numbers. And he's trying to defend his work and at the same time lie about the impact of what he's done, which tells us, it reinforces for us everything we've known about Elon. Again, trillionaire, successful business person. Henry Ford was successful too. You wouldn't want your daughter to marry him. It's he had some ideas about race that that more accurately probably reflects the modern Republican Party, but despicable, reprehensible, and disgusting. But it didn't mean that he couldn't set up an assembly line and build stuff. Right? So in the U.S., you think of that kind of laid back, Cali. No, man, we're going to learn. We don't want any government intervention. We want to be able to kind of freeball it, learn, do the cool stuff, innovate the valley. We can get money if we need it, so we don't need government, which is not really true because obviously the billions of dollars that Elon Musk got in seed money and other people. But there's plenty of cash out there. It's like, just leave us alone. Let us think deep thoughts because we're the smartest people in the room at all times. And that to the credit of those tech bros who we like to take the piss out of every chance we can because we've seen what they're like as humans, which is usually a failing grade. But as innovators, they're tip top. But what happens when you layer in? Well, first, let me do the anthropic of it, right? So there is. I won't recount the entire timeline, but Anthropic a little bit ahead of the other competitors, and the models are a little bit too smart for the humans and getting ahead of us. And the Trump administration, wanted the full condom off approach to innovation across tech because that's what Republicans say that they are. They're, excuse me, for deregulation at all costs. Anything government is antithetical to proper business practice. But the only you can trust tech bros to get together and make decisions for the benefit of humanity and not their pocketbook. You cannot do that because they have proven, like Elon and others, that Sam Altman was warning about the importance of controls, and then he said, "Fuck that! I never said that," and went, full speed ahead. Anthropic, we learned that there has to be some sort of a government function in putting some reasonable guardrails to avoid people getting run over and to avoid causing unnecessary damage to the underlying economy and the labor force. So, and Trump has people around him, a couple that know what they're doing, but they're not advocates for an intelligent approach to AI safety. They are more in the South African spend limitless, unregulated Peter Thiel and those folks. So we're not going to hope for them in a functioning administration. If Trump administration were that, you would have government stepping in and saying, "I want you guys to succeed, but you're not going to run over the country in order to make an extra couple $1 billion. You're going to follow these common sense guidelines, and if you don't, we're going to clip you." The only reason that things have slowed down now in the US AI development pipeline is that Trump realized the pace of the development and that he couldn't adequately get a big enough, he couldn't wet his beak enough before things get really moving. He wants, for corrupt purposes, he wants to be able to to gather some of the profits from each of these companies, and done maybe do some of the same. You know, Republicans and Trump are out there. Trump this past weekend crying about socialism and particularly communism, when the with quantum and with Intel, what the US government is doing by taking an equity position in these corporations is on line number 2 of the Communist Handbook. It's magnificent. It's fine if you want a public-private partnership, but describe it for what it is, tell the truth. I know, I'm talking about Trump, I realize that. But be honest and transparent with what your intentions are. I would imagine that Trump will take those little private parts of, what was that? Yeah, that was private parts. Yeah, that was the book by the Chalk Chalk, right? Anyways, which will be popular with a mega crowd. Be transparent. If you're going to say to, as he did essentially with quantum, I'm going to take 10% off the top of one, two, three, four, five, six, 9 companies in the quantum space, right? But what I would imagine he'll do, because this is what he does all the time, is take that share, rate which ones are by the end of his term. Don't take the risk yourself, leave the risk on the taxpayer. And then as you're nearing the end of your administration, peel off the tasty bits from Howard Stern is who, I'm sorry, Shock Jock, yeah. Um, Take the tasty bits off of those 9 companies times 10% share and just take 2% here, 1% there of the ones that are most promising and put them in the Donald Trump Family Foundation and give a little extra gravy to the kids that they're all billionaires now already. So, but that's what corrupt organizations do. So in the country, with the philosophy to allow for the open source philosophy perspective on development, things are closing down, but for corrupt purposes. He's not closing down for safety purposes because he couldn't give a fuck about safety, but he feels that he's going to miss the opportunity to get 3 extra bites at the apple. So that's our boy. Flying back across to see Xi Jinping, and another interesting paradox. Right? So they were open by necessity because of the expense of the toys that Larry and Bill had. As their economy exploded, they started to reel it in a little bit, and perhaps they don't want their tech guys out on GitHub and potentially letting U.S. spy agencies and industry know exactly how China is doing, because that's not how they roll. They like to do it in secret. They started to close down the GitHub of their world and to constrict innovation a little bit, to control leakage. The reverse of IP theft is, to protect against that, the constriction. So the Chinese Communist Party said, no, slow down there, cowboys. But the kids, the predominantly, obviously, developers, predominantly young men, said no, in a polite way, not a send me to jail for 50 years kind of way. Jimmy Lau. This is, they said, no, we are innovators. We need that. We need that. The intercourse, the non-sexual definition of the word. We need that. We need to intermingle, share ideas, take from one in the open source. And I want to they do that well. They do that element of this larger program much more efficiently than I do. So my 80% is awesome. My 20% is technically suck ass. So I'm going to borrow from the open market, use their tool to fill in that, make my that 20% of my weak sister a little bit stronger. And then I can turn around and sell it. But selling things like that in China is a little bit more complicated than Silicon Valley. But there's intermingling too. But it's interesting that they tried to close things down, and the citizenry, the Chinese citizens, the tech kids who are indispensable to their growth, who they will put up with a little bit of intransigence and a little bit of lip from the young studs, and say, "Okay, we heard you. We're continue do your thing, and exchange information, but we're watching you. And if any of that silly shit that you're sharing, we told you that 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9, you can't share any of that anywhere in the world, even here. If you don't break those rules, then you're good and continue to grow because we need to close the gap on the US. So, it's push and pull. And it's an interesting paradox that what will slow down the Trump administration a little bit is the corrosive nature of corruption, which I wrote about this morning. And the unintended consequences, like, well, everybody's making money, so a little bit of corruption, it doesn't really harm anything. It always does. It's a matter of when. It's a matter of when does the corrosion drip all the way down into the inner workings of the machine and thereby foul it up like I'm building a steam engine, talking 100 years ago. But that's what corrosion does. And even Trump, my analogy was with FIFA, that, two of the most corrupt organizations in the world, Trump.com and FIFA, even with their tremendous success, Trump's much more short-lived than FIFA that's been banging for decades. But when Infantino turns around for corrupt purposes and pulls a red card, yeah, it's a red card. It's one game. It assures the U.S. players get in there. But I mean, the tipping point. Think about if that was if that if not Bosnia was the U.S. beat Iran or needed the help of getting a red card pulled, and the U.S. goes through and Iran goes home. And they pile their grievances on top of other things about, oh, I don't know, killing my entire family. And they're on the Hezbollah hotline. They're not to make light of this, but Hezbollah and other groups, including the regime itself, the IRGC, personally threatened President Donald John Trump for killing their leader, right, Mr. Khomeini, and his second son, the one that's supposed to be leading the whole thing. People still don't see him on a regular basis. The other kids came out for the solemn send-off for their father and leader this past weekend. And I touched on the fact that that the Trump administration is so tiny and grievance filled and so fucking petty that Trump has Marco Rubio on the line to world leaders saying, "I don't want you to show up at the funeral for the former Iranian supreme leader. I don't want to see you there If you go, there's gonna be consequences like, "Hey, how would you like a tariff package tailored just for you?" And they did that, and that caused some leaders to respectfully decline, or, how then it's just a shell game. We have 5 people we could send. We wanna send the most senior leader in the stead of the prime minister or the president, which would be the utmost respect to the fallen leader. But Trump's gonna do a live fire tariff exercise over our country. So, we're gonna send the busboy and his boyfriend instead, because then we can say we tried to the Islamic Republic, and then when Trump and Vance piss and moan like spoiled children, say, "No, no, sir, we heard you. We didn't send any senior leadership. We sent somebody that sells flowers." Yeah, but who knows? And that other point about the vote that's coming up in the UN, it could be today, tomorrow, very very soon, about Cuba sanctions. That there's going to be discussions, and I don't know the status of whether they'll be able to kneecap a vote, but the premise is that what the U.S. is doing to Cuban, you and me, Cuban citizens on the ground with the blockades, embargoes, and other interference, is that they're starving an entire population to death. Right? That's Rubio's extended family, right? So the Trump administration, because they didn't hand over the keys to the entire island of Cuba, so the Trump kids, including Ivanka, showing up and like, "Oh my God, Jared and I were just boating around Cuba. Never seen anything, a beach like this before. We just knew this is the place. We wanted to build our resort." So it was fantastic. We connected. I felt I never felt more Cuban in my entire life. The Trump children thing, just like in that silly ass shit in Albania. So, in any case, this was love your thoughts on open source, closed source, and the paradox of why the different philosophies on that development are influenced by noble national purposes, right? Or corruption, like so many other things in the Trump administration. And we can decry the evils of communism, but they're our biggest trading partner. They're we no longer have the standing to point at China and say, you know, you guys are the worst, because now we've taken the top position. Congratulations to the United States. So, yeah. Great. So thank you. Have a beautiful day. Restack, retweet, everything. Subscribe, of course, and we will be with you again tomorrow in some way, shape, or form at some time with differing length, timing, certainly differing quality. Because some days it just it might suck a little more, but we endeavor to do our best. That's the royal we. So thank you, and I'm going to get a little bit closer, see if there's any chance of me finding a button because the sun is behind the clouds. Thank you. I'm gonna take a risk here.